The final stage of spiritual awakening, most never reach this. As the great philosopher Lao Tzu once said, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Many of us embark on the path of self-discovery, yet few ever reach the summit where the ego finally dissolves into the infinite. Welcome back to Spiritual Wisdom, where today we are exploring the profound and often elusive final stage of spiritual awakening, a level of consciousness that most seekers never quite reach. This journey isn't just about theory. It's about a radical shift in how you experience your daily existence, inviting a sense of peace and clarity that remains unshakable regardless of life's storms. As we dive into these transformative principles, I want to hear from you. What has been the most challenging part of your own spiritual journey so far? Let us know in the comments below, and let's build a community of growth together. If you're ready to move beyond the surface and unlock the true depth of your being, let's begin. 1. Wholeness over holiness. The journey into the depths of spirituality is often sold as a climb toward a shimmering peak of endless light. Yet the most profound truth of a genuine spiritual awakening is that the final stage is not an ascent into perfection, but a courageous descent into wholeness. To truly wake up, one must realize that the pursuit of holiness is frequently a clever mask for the ego, a way to hide from the messy, shadowed corners of our own nature under the guise of being spiritual. This final threshold, which many approach but few dare to cross, demands that we abandon the binary of good versus evil, and instead embrace the vast, unfiltered reality of who we actually are. Carl Jung, one of the most insightful explorers of the human psyche, warned against the phenomenon known as spiritual bypassing, where individuals use spiritual ideas and practices to avoid facing their unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and the darker aspects of their personality. He famously noted that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This final stage of spiritual awakening is characterized by the transition from seeking holiness to achieving wholeness, a state where the fractured parts of the self are finally brought back into a singular, honest unity. Holiness, in the traditional sense, often implies a rejection of the low or the bad in favor of the high and the divine. But this creates a split in the soul that prevents true liberation. To reach the end of the path, you must sacrifice your innocence, that comforting yet ultimately deceptive lie that you are purely good, kind, and enlightened to embrace the totality of your being. This process is like a grand, ancient estate where most people spend their entire lives only in the well-lit parlor, greeting guests with a polite smile while locking the doors to the basement and the attic where the unacceptable parts of themselves are hidden. True spirituality means taking the keys, walking into those dark rooms, and realizing that the dust and the shadows are just as much a part of the architecture as the gold-leafed ceilings. This integration is inherently uncomfortable because it requires us to face our shadow, those traits we have suppressed, such as anger, greed, or selfishness, which have been running our lives from the subconscious. Expanding on this, we must recognize that the innocence we cling to is often a form of self-protection, a shell that must be cracked for the spirit to grow. We want to believe we are the hero of our own story, but the final stage of spiritual awakening teaches us that we are also the villain, the victim, and the bystander, all existing within the same heartbeat. This realization isn't meant to cause despair, but rather to foster a radical, grounded compassion that does not need to perform for the world. When you stop trying to be holy, you finally have the energy to be real, shifting your perspective like a tree that realizes it cannot reach for the heavens unless its roots go just as deep into the dark, damp earth. You stop judging yourself and others through a narrow lens of morality and start seeing the world through the expansive lens of integration. This level of spirituality is rare because it feels like a death, the death of the perfect self-image, but it is the only way to experience a life that is truly vibrant and authentic. By accepting the totality of your being, you bridge the gap between the human and the divine, finding that the sacred isn't found by escaping the world, but by fully inhabiting every single part of yourself. Only when you have looked into the depths of your own darkness can you truly claim to stand in the light. For that light is no longer a fragile illusion, but a resilient glow born from the fires of total self-honesty and the courage to be whole. Have you ever tried embracing your shadows instead of just seeking the light? If so, share how choosing wholeness over holiness has changed your life in the comments below. If you're ready to start, comment, "I am whole," so we can embark on this final stage of awakening together. 2. The collapse of the persona. The journey into the deepest realms of spirituality and spiritual development often begins not with a burst of light, but with a profound and unsettling shadow known as the Great Despair. You might find yourself standing in the middle of a life that by every external standard looks absolutely perfect. You have the career, the relationships, and the reputation of being a good person. Yet, inside, you feel a hollow silence that no achievement can fill. This is the moment the mask begins to crack, and that persona you have spent decades carefully constructing starts to dissolve right before your eyes. You are entering a stage of annihilation that feels less like a peaceful rebirth and much more like the total destruction of everything you thought you were. It is a terrifying transition where you suddenly become a stranger in your own life, looking in the mirror and failing to recognize the person staring back at you because the social mask of the successful professional or the dutiful family member no longer fits. You must understand that this collapse is not a sign of failure or mental breakdown, but rather the necessary clearing of the land before a new way of being can be built. Most people turn back at this point because the pain of losing their identity is too great. But for you, this is the invitation to move beyond the superficial layers of existence. As your ego-driven goals lose their flavor, you are forced to confront the naked truth of your soul without the distractions of status or social approval. This process of spiritual development requires you to sit in the void, embracing the discomfort of not knowing who you are, which allows the universe to strip away the false you to reveal the eternal I. It is a visceral, often lonely experience where the old structures of your reality crumble into dust, leaving you standing in the rubble of your former self. Yet, within this destruction lies the seed of ultimate freedom. Because once you have lost everything you thought defined you, you are finally free to become everything you truly are. You are moving toward the final stage of awakening that most never reach because they are too afraid to let their old selves die. This death of the persona is the gatekeeper to true wisdom, demanding that you trade your comfortable lies for an uncomfortable yet liberating truth. By staying present through this annihilation, you begin to see that the person who was suffering was just a character you were playing. And as that character fades, a vast, unshakable peace begins to emerge from the depths of your being. As the foundations of your old world give way, you may find that the activities and conversations that once brought you comfort now feel like a foreign language you no longer wish to speak. This isolation is not a punishment, but a sanctuary where your spiritual development can flourish away from the noise of a world obsessed with appearances. You are learning that the great despair is actually a profound form of honesty, an admission that the physical world alone is not enough to sustain the hunger of the spirit. When the mask cracks, it allows the light of consciousness to pour into the dark corners of your subconscious, illuminating the fears you have spent a lifetime running from. You are being asked to witness your own undoing with the eyes of a detached observer, realizing that the one who watches the mask fall is the only part of you that was ever real. This realization marks the transition from being a person having a spiritual experience to being a spiritual presence navigating a human experience. The weight of the world's expectations begins to lift as you realize that you no longer have anyone to impress and no role to maintain. This level of spiritual development is often described as a dark night, yet it is the very darkness that allows the stars of inner wisdom to become visible. You are being stripped of your armor so that you can finally touch the world with a raw and authentic heart, while those around you may be confused by your withdrawal or your sudden lack of ambition for worldly trophies. You are secretly gaining a treasure that cannot be taxed or taken away. This annihilation is the ultimate act of grace, a divine pruning that removes the dead branches of the ego so the fruit of the spirit can finally grow. You are not losing your mind. You are losing your limitations. You are not becoming less. You are becoming the infinite space in which all things happen. This is the stage where you stop seeking and start being, where the silence becomes your most trusted teacher and the void becomes your home. As you surrender to this collapse, you discover that you are not the one who is dying, but the one who is finally, truly being born into a state of awareness that transcends time and identity. 3. Confrontation with the shadow. Deep within the journey of your soul lies a threshold that few dare to cross, for it requires you to dismantle the very identity you have spent a lifetime constructing. To attain the final stage of spiritual awakening, you must step into the silent, cold chambers of your own psyche to confront the shadow, that hidden reservoir containing everything about yourself that you have labeled as shameful, weak, or inherently evil. This is not a mere intellectual exercise. It is a visceral, transformative encounter with the parts of your being that you have spent decades suppressing. As Carl Jung profoundly observed, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This process marks the beginning of true spiritual wisdom, demanding a radical honesty that strips away the ego's protective layers. You are called to undertake the grueling task of withdrawing your projections, which means You must finally stop blaming your parents, your partners, or the flaws of society for the turbulence in your life. You begin to recognize that the darkness you so easily judge in the external world is actually a reflection of the unacknowledged shadows residing within your own heart. By pulling these projections back, you reclaim your power, but you also lose the comforting shield of victimhood. As you dive deeper into this internal landscape, you will experience the ego's most painful sacrifice, the death of moral superiority. You can no longer sustain the illusion of being better than others because you have come face to face with your own capacity for betrayal, selfishness, and cruelty. This realization bridges the chasm between you and the rest of humanity, as you understand that the potential for every human vice lives within you just as much as the potential for virtue. Alexander Solzhenitsyn captured this truth perfectly when he wrote, "The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart." When you accept that you are capable of the same darkness you once condemned in others, the pedestal of the spiritual person crumbles, replaced by a grounded, unshakable humility. This is the moment where judgment dies and genuine compassion is born, for you can no longer look down upon another soul when you have seen the same depths within yourself. This integration is the hallmark of spiritual wisdom, as it transforms the energy once wasted on repression into a unified force of presence. You are no longer a divided house at war with itself. Instead, you become a whole being who has integrated the light and the dark into a single, radiant consciousness. By embracing this complexity, you move beyond the binary of good versus bad and enter the final stage of awakening, where the mask of the ego is discarded, leaving only the vast, silent truth of your infinite nature. Here are a few options for your call to action, tailored to the deep, transformative nature of a video about the shadow self and the final stages of awakening. Comment below, "I embrace my whole self," if you are ready to walk through this final stage. 4. Ego death and the void. The profound journey of spirituality eventually leads every seeker to a precipice known as the brutal version of ego death, a stage characterized by a terrifying yet liberating realization that every pillar of your identity is an illusion. Most people spend their lives meticulously constructing a persona built upon their name, their moral values, and their professional achievements. Yet the final stage of a spiritual awakening strips these away to reveal they are merely arbitrary stories we tell ourselves to feel secure in a chaotic universe. Imagine a traveler who has spent decades carrying a heavy trunk filled with maps and souvenirs, only to reach a vast ocean and realize that none of those items can help them swim. This is the moment the soul recognizes that the self is a mental construct. This realization thrusts the individual into the liminal space, a hauntingly beautiful and disorienting state of being suspended between the echoes of who you once were and the mystery of who you are becoming. It is a psychological and spiritual no man's land where the old world has lost its flavor, but the new world has not yet materialized, leaving you feeling like a ghost haunting your own life. While the average person encounters this emptiness and immediately recoils in horror, rushing to find a new mask, a new career, or a new belief system to fill the silence, the truly awakened individual understands that the void is not a pit to be escaped, but a womb for the spirit. They choose to sit in absolute nothingness, refusing the temptation to grab onto a new identity, and instead, they wait with the patience of a mountain. This period of stillness is essential because it is only in the absence of noise that the persistent identification with the voice in the head can begin to fracture and eventually dissolve entirely. This voice, which we have mistaken for our soul for 30 or 40 years, is finally seen as nothing more than a repetitive neurological loop. To endure this process is to be like a piece of iron being held in a forge. The heat of the void melts away the rigid shape of the ego until only the raw, molten essence of awareness remains. As you linger in this silence, a shift occurs where you no longer view the void as a vacuum of lack, but as a field of infinite potentiality. You begin to understand the metaphor of the bird that is terrified when its cage is first opened. At first, the vastness of the sky looks like a falling death, but soon it realizes that the emptiness is actually the very thing that allows its wings to work. By refusing to rush back into the safety of a new egoic mask, you allow the false self to starve, and in its place, a crystalline clarity emerges that does not require a name or a history to exist. This is the ultimate test of spirituality, demanding a courage that goes beyond physical bravery. It is the courage to be nobody so that you can finally be everything. Through this seamless transition from the personal to the universal, the seeker discovers that the terrifying nothingness they once feared is actually the ultimate freedom, a state where the burden of me is finally laid down. In this stillness, the boundaries of the individual melt into the fabric of existence, and you realize that you were never the wave, but always the deep, silent water beneath it. This transformation ensures that when you finally return to the world of forms, you do so not as a person playing a part, but as the vastness itself, merely wearing a human shape for a little while. 5. The union of opposites, individuation. In the profound journey of spirituality, you eventually reach a summit that few ever dare to climb, a state of being where the fragmentation of the self finally dissolves into a terrifyingly beautiful wholeness known as the union of opposites. This final stage of spiritual development is not about floating away into a cloud of bliss or becoming a passive observer of life. Rather, it is the rigorous process of individuation where you courageously integrate both your radiant light and your darkest shadows into one coherent, unshakable force. You have likely spent years trying to suppress the parts of yourself that felt aggressive, selfish, or shameful. Yet true spiritual wisdom teaches you that until you claim your shadow, it will continue to rule your life from the subconscious like an invisible puppet master. When you finally stop running from your own darkness and instead invite it to the table, you undergo a metamorphosis that makes you a dangerous presence in a world built on fragile illusions. You become dangerous not because you seek to inflict harm, but because you can no longer be manipulated, lied to, or seduced by the empty promises of power and status that keep most of humanity enslaved. Because you have faced the monsters within your own heart, you are no longer frightened by the masks other people wear, and you can see with piercing clarity through the complex social games and pretenses that define modern society. This transparency grants you a level of freedom that is exceedingly rare. You are no longer a pawn on someone else's chessboard, because your internal compass is now forged from the ironclad union of your highest ideals and your rawest, most primal instincts. In this state of total integration, the way you interact with the world shifts fundamentally as you abandon the superficial mask of being nice in favor of the much deeper, more grounded virtue of being truly kind. You realize that being nice is often a hollow performance fueled by a desperate need for external validation or a paralyzing fear of conflict, whereas true kindness is an authentic expression of your soul that requires no audience and seeks no reward. This shift often manifests as the setting of brutal, uncompromising boundaries and a refusal to enable the toxic behaviors or weaknesses of those around you, even if your honesty makes you unpopular or misunderstood by the masses. You understand that true love is not synonymous with people-pleasing. Instead, it is about standing firmly in your truth and demanding that others meet you at that level of integrity. As you walk this path, your spirituality ceases to be a retreat from reality and becomes a deeper immersion into it, where you possess the immense strength to be soft and the sharp wisdom to be firm. You no longer strive for the static lie of perfection, choosing instead the vibrant truth of wholeness, embracing the totality of the human experience with an open heart and a mind that cuts through deception like a blade. This integration allows you to move through the world with a silent, heavy authority, as your very presence challenges the shadows in others and calls them toward their own difficult awakening. You are no longer a person divided against yourself, and in that internal unity, you find a power that is both ancient and ever new, realizing that the liberation you sought was always found in the courage to embrace the entirety of who you are. By acknowledging your capacity for both destruction and creation, you become a bridge between worlds, grounded in the reality of the earth while reaching for the heights of the divine. This is the stage where you stop asking for permission to exist and instead command your space with an authenticity that is as unyielding as it is compassionate. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more spiritual wisdom on awakening, individuation, and the union of opposites, where inner conflict transforms into wholeness and true self-mastery begins. 6. The return to the world. The final stage of spiritual awakening is not a departure from reality into a cloud of mystical abstraction, but rather a profound and grounded return to the world that requires a rare depth of spiritual wisdom to truly embody. Most seekers spend years or even decades attempting to transcend the human experience, chasing a permanent state of bliss or an intellectualized version of enlightenment that keeps them perpetually looking toward a future horizon. However, the true pinnacle of this journey is reached only when you stop caring about being special, holy, or even awakened, and instead find the courage to be nobody at all, moving through your daily life with a quiet simplicity that the ego often finds terrifying. This transition marks the end of the spiritual hunt. The frantic energy you once spent searching for the next big realization suddenly evaporates, leaving behind a stillness that doesn't require a mountaintop or a silent retreat to maintain. You begin to understand what Lao Tzu meant when he said, "At the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. And you realize that the answer is not a complex philosophy, but a direct, unmediated participation in the present moment. This freedom from seeking is the ultimate liberation because it releases you from the burden of self-improvement, allowing you to exist as a natural expression of life itself, much like the wind or the trees, without needing to justify your existence or prove your worth to anyone. As you settle into this state, you encounter the most paradoxical aspect of the path: transcendence through total acceptance. In the earlier stages of your journey, you might have tried to suppress your negative emotions or spiritualize your pain away. But in this final stage, you no longer run from the inherent friction of being human. You still feel the raw, biting cold of grief, the sudden flare of anger, and the physical limitations of the body. But the crucial difference is that you have stopped manufacturing stories around these sensations. You no longer tell yourself that your pain is a sign of failure or that your anger is a setback. Instead, you allow these experiences to pass through you like weather systems moving across a vast, empty sky. This mastery allows you to hold the most jarring opposites of life simultaneously. A state of consciousness where you can be utterly devastated by the world's tragedies and yet remain fundamentally okay at your very core. This isn't a form of cold detachment or indifference. Rather, it is a capacity to love the world so deeply that you can accept its darkness alongside its light without being shattered by the contrast. By integrating this spiritual wisdom into your bones, you become a bridge between the formless and the world of form, living a life that appears normal on the outside, but is fueled by an infinite depth on the inside. You return to the kitchen, the office, and the marketplace, performing your duties with a newfound lightness because you are no longer trying to get something out of life, but are instead focused on what you can bring to it. As Ram Dass famously observed, we're all just walking each other home. And this becomes your primary orientation as you interact with others, not as a teacher looking down at students, but as a fellow traveler who has realized that the ordinary is the most extraordinary thing there is. You find that the greatest siddhi or spiritual power is not the ability to perform miracles, but the ability to wash a dish, speak to a neighbor, or endure a difficult day with a heart that remains wide open and a mind that is free from the need for things to be different than they are. You have finally come to the end of the road, only to find that the destination was the very place where you started, now seen through eyes that are no longer clouded by the illusions of the self. If this message is resonating with you, comment, "I return with wisdom," below. Your presence and reflection help us share deeper spiritual insight together. As we've explored today, reaching the final stage of spiritual awakening isn't about acquiring more knowledge, but about the total surrender of the ego to the oneness of all existence. It is a rare and profound shift from seeking the truth to simply being the truth. If this message resonated with your journey, please give this video a like and share it with those who might need this guidance. For more deep dives into the path of enlightenment, subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming explorations. Thank you for walking this path with us. Until next time, stay mindful and stay awakened. 8 signs you have the rarest psychological type on Earth. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Today, we're diving into the rarest psychological type on Earth, the kind of mind that sees the world differently, not because it tries to, but because it's wired to. If you've ever felt out of place, deeply intuitive, or unusually perceptive, this video may reveal something powerful about who you really are. As you listen, try to reflect on your own experiences and ask yourself, which of these signs resonate with me most? Share your thoughts in the comments below so we can grow together as a community of self-aware, evolving souls. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where every insight is an invitation to become more of who you were always meant to be. 1. Supernatural emotional depth. You do not simply feel emotions, you navigate them like vast oceans, each wave carrying layers of meaning that most people will never notice. And this is why your emotional depth often appears supernatural to those around you. What others call mood or sensitivity unfolds within you as a full psychological symphony, where every subtle shift in energy becomes a message your inner world knows how to translate. You sense unspoken intentions, hidden emotional tones, and the quiet truths buried beneath someone's carefully crafted words. Not because you are unstable, but because you are exquisitely tuned into the deeper layers of human experience. Carl Jung called this profound inner sensitivity the doorway to the objective psyche, the realm where emotions are not just personal reactions, but windows into universal patterns of truth. Your feelings do not simply pass through you. They speak to you, guide you, and sometimes warn you, which is why you often notice emotional changes or energetic discomfort long before anyone else realizes something is wrong. This depth can make you appear intense or mysterious, but in reality, it is emotional sophistication, your ability to perceive meaning beyond the surface. And yet, this rare sensitivity often pulls you naturally towards spirituality because you have always sensed that life moves through invisible layers, that every emotion has a spiritual echo, and that every connection carries energetic information beneath the physical interaction. As you grow, this sensitivity begins shaping your spiritual awakening, helping you recognize that inner guidance is not imagination, but intuition sharpened through emotional intelligence. You have known for a long time that what you feel is real, even when the world encourages you to numb it or doubt it. Your emotional depth becomes a compass, pointing you toward alignment, truth, and integrity, and pulling you away from environments, people, and energies that are out of resonance. This is why your presence often feels comforting yet powerful. People feel seen by you in a way they cannot explain, because you perceive the soul behind the behavior, the intention beneath the action, the wound beneath the words. But your depth has also shaped your story. You may have been told you were too sensitive, too emotional, or overthinking, when in truth, you were simply processing the world at a greater vibrational frequency than those around you. You learned early that others do not feel with the same intensity, and you may have dimmed your own emotional truth to make them comfortable. Yet, as Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are is someone whose emotional complexity is not a flaw, but an extraordinary gift, an inner instrument tuned to the frequencies most people never hear. When you honor this depth, instead of suppressing it, your emotions refine into wisdom, your intuition strengthens, your self-awareness sharpens, and the world within you becomes a powerful source of clarity, perception, and spiritual strength. This is the silent brilliance behind your emotional depth. It is not chaos, but intelligence; not weakness, but refined perception; not instability, but an innate connection to truth, one that continues guiding you deeper into your spirituality and your ongoing spiritual awakening. Comment below. I honor my emotional depth if you recognize this rare sensitivity within yourself and are ready to embrace the unique gift Carl Jung spoke about. 2. Sacred curiosity and radical questioning. You naturally live in a state of sacred curiosity and radical questioning, always drawn to the deeper meaning beneath life, systems, and relationships, never satisfied with surface-level explanations or blind conformity. While others may accept what is handed to them without resistance, you feel an inner pull to ask why, to look behind appearances, and to sense what is hidden beneath words and behaviors. This is not rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It is the mark of a rare mind, one that Carl Jung described through the transcendent function, the ability to hold paradox, to live between opposites, and to perceive truths that most people instinctively avoid because they feel uncomfortable or destabilizing. You are wired to seek meaning, not comfort. This is why you cannot fully surrender to shallow norms or rigid belief systems that lack authenticity. Your inner world refuses to settle for borrowed conclusions, emotional shortcuts, or inherited ideas that do not resonate with truth. Even when society encourages you to stay quiet, stay small, or accept what is convenient, something within you continues to whisper that there is more to life than what is visible. This inner tension between what is seen and what is felt is where both your spirituality and spiritual development quietly evolve. Because your questions are not destructive, they are awakening. They pull you inward and upward at the same time, guiding you to examine not only the world, but also your fears, your patterns, your attachments, and your unconscious motives. Because of this, you often move through life with heightened awareness. You notice emotional undercurrents in conversations, unspoken tensions in systems, and hidden motives in relationships. Not because you are suspicious, but because your perception naturally extends beyond the surface. You feel things before they are said, sense shifts before they become visible, and recognize misalignment even when everything appears fine on the outside. This depth also shapes the way you bond with others. You seek meaning over convenience, truth over performance, and authenticity over approval. Shallow connections drain you, while deep, soulful exchanges nourish you, because your inner world is designed for depth, not pretense. This same sacred curiosity that sharpens your awareness also turns inward, making you capable of profound self-reflection, emotional honesty, and inner growth. You question why you feel what you feel, why you repeat certain cycles, and what unresolved parts of you are asking to be seen. This is where real transformation begins. Because you do not escape discomfort, you study it. Jung's work lives through this process as you learn to hold both light and shadow, confidence and doubt, strength and vulnerability at once without collapsing into extremes. This capacity to exist between opposites is what allows you to evolve rather than remain fixed in fear or illusion. Yet this depth does not come without weight. At times, your mind feels heavy from constant reflection. Your heart grows tired from emotional intensity, and loneliness can arise when few people seem to speak your inner language. When insight is not balanced with grounding, you may drift into overthinking, emotional fatigue, or spiritual isolation. Still, this question is not your weakness. It is your compass. It is the quiet force that keeps you aligned with growth, even when you feel lost. It explains why you are drawn to psychology, symbolism, mysticism, healing, and the unseen forces shaping human behavior. Often without knowing exactly why, only that something ancient within you is being activated. The rare truth is that minds like yours are not meant to repeat what has already been thought, but to refine it through lived awareness. You are here to challenge unconscious patterns, to embody insight, and to transform confusion into clarity through lived experience. The deeper you honor this nature, the more your life shifts from searching to recognizing, from resisting to understanding, from surviving to consciously evolving. The true value you are meant to carry forward is simple yet powerful. Trust your questions instead of silencing them. Seek truth without needing permission. Allow growth without guilt. Balance reflection with rest. And recognize that your sacred curiosity is not a burden. It is the engine of your spiritual development and the doorway through which your spirituality becomes real, embodied, and transformative. 3. Conscious independence and self-built identity. You developed your psychological independence early in life, not because the path was gentle, but because adversity required you to rely on your own inner strength long before you could safely rely on anyone else. Instead of seeking constant validation from the outside world, you learned to build your identity from within, layer by layer, through self-reflection, endurance, and quiet self-trust. This inner construction of the self is what Carl Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey toward becoming whole, a process most people unconsciously avoid because it demands responsibility, honesty, and the courage to face both light and shadow. When others were learning how to belong by fitting in, you were learning how to survive by standing alone. Over time, that separation did not harden you. It refined you. What began as emotional necessity slowly transformed into inner clarity, and what once felt like isolation evolved into awareness. You no longer shape yourself to match expectations because your sense of self was forged through lived experience rather than borrowed through social roles. This is one of the clearest signs of a rare psychological type. Your identity is not assembled from approval, trends, or emotional dependence, but built through conscious choice and inner inquiry. This kind of independence carries a quiet power. You may speak softly, yet your presence feels grounded. You may choose solitude at times, yet your energy still feels steady in a crowded room. You do not cling to others to feel complete, because you learned early that wholeness must be cultivated from the inside. While many are still searching for themselves in labels, relationships, or social mirrors, you are already walking the inward path, guided by an inner compass shaped through struggle and reflection. This path is not loud, but it is deeply rooted in spiritual wisdom. As Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, yet very few willingly endure the discomfort required to reach that truth. You did not wait for permission to begin that work. Life placed you on that path early, and through it, you developed discernment instead of dependency, depth instead of imitation, and self-authority instead of emotional borrowing. This does not make you cold or distant. It makes you internally anchored. Your independence is not a rejection of connection, but a mature form of it. You do not seek others to complete you, but to share with you. And this is precisely why people may feel both drawn to you and unsettled by you. At the same time, your self-built identity quietly reflects what many have not yet faced within themselves. Your inner stability exposes the fragility of unconscious living without ever needing to say a word. The deeper you move along this inward journey of individuation, the more you realize that your independence is not merely psychological, but spiritual as well. You no longer look to the world to define you. You listen inward to your conscience, your intuition, and a truth that cannot be seen but can be felt. This is where spiritual awakening quietly begins, not with spectacle, but with the steady courage to stand in your truth, even when no one else understands it. And in that silent strength, your life becomes a living expression of the union between Carl Jung's psychology and timeless spiritual wisdom. Affirm your inner strength by commenting below, "I am sovereign in my identity." Let this be your reminder that your independence and self-built identity are guiding you toward your highest truth. 4. Hyperperceptive intuition. Your hyperperceptive intuition gives you an ability that most people will never fully understand, because you do not simply observe the world, you feel it. You sense the subtle shifts in tone, the tightening of someone's jaw, the hesitation behind a forced smile, and the unspoken truth hiding beneath polished words. This is not overthinking. It is what Carl Jung described as perception via the unconscious, a natural and immediate recognition of patterns that others step over blindly. You pick up emotional undercurrents in silence, detect mismatched energy before conflict appears, and notice the tiniest fractures in someone's behavior long before they become visible to the rest of the world. And while people may misunderstand this depth as suspicion or sensitivity, you intuitively know it is far more precise than that, because your mind works in layers. What others hear as conversation, you experience as information woven with nuance, tension, and meaning that lives between the lines. Yet this level of awareness, when left unprotected, can slowly drain you from the inside out, because feeling so much requires boundaries that most people with your rare psychological type never learned to set early in life, especially when they were conditioned to be the healer, the listener, the emotional anchor for everyone else. This intuitive gift becomes heavy not because it is wrong, but because it is constant. You absorb the unresolved grief of a friend when they step into the room. You sense the disappointment someone carries, even when they say they are fine. You feel the shift in someone's energy the moment they lose trust, and you detect misalignment in relationships long before the breakup arrives. And while all of this gives you profound psychological insight, it also becomes a silent burden, because your nervous system is processing information that others are not aware they are even expressing. This is why emotional burnout appears in your life, not as sudden collapse, but as slow erosion. Too much empathy, too many unspoken responsibilities, too much merging with people who never realized how deeply you felt them. Jung warned that without conscious boundaries, the unconscious becomes a force that overwhelms rather than guides. And this is precisely the tension you live through. Sensing everything, yet not always knowing how to filter what isn't yours. Here is where spirituality becomes essential, not as belief, but as a practice of self-preservation. Because your spiritual awakening begins the moment you realize that your intuition is not meant to carry people, but to clarify your own path. As you grow into this awareness, you start recognizing that your intuition is not random. It is a compass. It tells you when a room is unsafe before your logic catches up. It warns you when someone's words do not match their energy. It guides you toward people whose presence feels like alignment and distances you from those whose presence feels like heaviness. With time, you learn that not every emotional signal requires intervention. Not every tension requires healing. And not every sorrow you sense belongs in your hands. You begin to separate empathy from responsibility, compassion from self-abandonment, and awareness from absorption. And once you understand that your sensitivity is not weakness, but refined perception, you stop apologizing for noticing what others overlook. You stop shrinking yourself to make people comfortable. You stop explaining how you know things you shouldn't know. Instead, you trust the quiet truth rising inside you, the same truth that Jung spent his life studying. When the unconscious speaks, the wise learn to listen. And in honoring this rare gift with stronger boundaries, clearer intuition, and deeper self-respect, you transform your hyper-perceptive nature from emotional exhaustion into spiritual clarity, allowing your inner world to become not a sponge for others, but a sanctuary for yourself. 5. Intense craving for meaning and authenticity. You carry an intense craving for meaning and authenticity that quietly governs the way you think, feel, and move through the world. And this is why you cannot tolerate inauthenticity in any form. Shallow goals feel empty to you. Surface-level conversations feel exhausting, and unaligned paths feel almost painful to follow because your inner world demands truth, coherence, and depth. You are not satisfied with appearances or borrowed identities. You want what is real beneath the surface. This inner demand is not something you learned. It is built into your psychological structure, and it constantly pulls you toward alignment between who you are inside and how you live on the outside. Because you live with this level of inner integrity, you naturally reject what is false without needing to argue or attack it. You may simply lose interest, withdraw your energy, or quietly choose a different path. Yet even in your silence, your presence has an effect. Without intending to, you challenge others to confront their own masks, because your refusal to participate in illusion highlights where others are still pretending. In this way, you function as what can only be described as an evolutionary catalyst. Change is stirred in your presence, not because you demand it, but because your way of being exposes what is misaligned. As Carl Jung expressed so powerfully, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this truth is not just an idea for you. It is a lived experience that shapes your daily choices. Your devotion to truth often places you on a different rhythm from the world around you. You may feel out of place in environments that reward performance over substance or status over sincerity. What excites others may leave you cold, while what truly moves you is meaning, purpose, and inner coherence. This is where your path of spirituality and spiritual development deepens, not through rituals alone, but through the constant inner refinement of values, motives, and identity. You are not driven to accumulate more masks. You are driven to remove them. Over time, your standards in relationships, work, and even self-expression become more precise, not because you are becoming rigid, but because your clarity is sharpening. This clarity, however, can be misunderstood. Some may see your intensity as judgment, your distance as coldness, or your silence as superiority. In truth, your intensity is simply devotion. Your distance is discernment, and your silence is often self-protection. You are not rejecting people, you are rejecting falseness. And this rejection is not destructive, it is surgical. It removes what does not belong so that what is true can finally breathe. Each time you choose alignment over comfort, or truth over approval, something old dissolves and something more essential begins to take shape. Your life, therefore, becomes less about fitting into the world as it is, and more about embodying the deeper potential of who you are becoming. Growth for you does not feel like climbing higher. It feels like going deeper. It feels like shedding, refining, and remembering. You begin to realize that your sensitivity to falseness is not a weakness to be corrected, but a gift to be mastered. It protects you from wasting years on what does not matter. It guides you toward relationships built on truth rather than performance. It anchors you in a form of spirituality that is lived through integrity, not merely spoken through beliefs. And through this discipline of inner honesty, you quietly encourage others to begin their own transformation simply by standing in what is real. Don't forget to subscribe for more wisdom on transforming your search for meaning into true inner fulfillment. 6. Continuous evolution and outgrowing the familiar. You repeatedly outgrow people, places, and even the versions of yourself you once believed would last forever. And this constant shedding is not instability. It is the natural rhythm of transformation that Carl Jung described as psychological death and rebirth. Each time you evolve, something within you must quietly end so something deeper can begin. And that process is rarely comfortable. You begin to feel that you can no longer return to spaces that once felt familiar because they now require you to dim your truth, soften your awareness, or pretend to be smaller than you have become. What once felt like home now feels restrictive. And this inner conflict is one of the clearest signatures of a rare psychological type. As your awareness expands, your tolerance for what is false, stagnant, or misaligned disappears. And this is where many relationships, environments, and even identities begin to fall away. People who once understood you may no longer recognize you, not because you are lost, but because you have changed at a level they cannot yet follow. Jung once said, "What looks like a breakdown is often a breakthrough." And this truth becomes visible in your life as cycles of ending and renewal that shape your character again and again. Every time you rise into a new level of clarity, you lose access to the world you came from. And that loss can feel painful, confusing, and deeply lonely. Yet this loneliness is not emptiness. It is the space where your new self is being formed. You are no longer able to bend your values just to preserve connection, and you no longer have the ability to ignore what your soul now sees. Your growth becomes irreversible. Once a truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Once your inner world shifts, your outer world must eventually follow. This is why others may resist your change, judge it, or misunderstand it. Your evolution reflects what they may still be avoiding within themselves, and not everyone is ready to face that reflection. This is where spiritual wisdom quietly weaves into psychological transformation. You are not simply changing for ambition, success, or appearance. You are changing because something inside you demands alignment between who you are becoming and how you are living. You would rather experience discomfort than live in contradiction. You would rather walk alone than walk falsely. This is the cost of deep awareness and the quiet mark of a rare inner structure. As Carl Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And that privilege often arrives wrapped in the pain of outgrowing what once felt safe. Each time you move forward, you leave behind not only people and places, but entire identities, old fears, old beliefs, old self-definitions that no longer hold your truth. Your life begins to feel less like a straight road and more like a series of initiations. Endings arrive without asking permission. New beginnings rise before you feel ready. Yet with every cycle, your inner authority strengthens, your clarity deepens, and your attachment to illusion weakens. You slowly stop fearing loss because you finally understand that every loss has been shaping your ability to live authentically. At a certain point, you no longer ask why doors keep closing behind you. You understand that they close because you no longer belong in the rooms they lead to. This awareness is not only psychological, it is spiritual. True spiritual wisdom is not about staying the same while speaking higher truths. It is about allowing your entire being to transform in alignment with what you now see as real. And the more you honor this inner evolution, the more you realize that your constant change is not chaos. It is the quiet proof of an awakened inner compass, guided not by comfort, but by truth. As Carl Jung revealed through the depths of the human psyche. 7. Transformational presence. Your presence carries a quiet gravity that few can name but many can feel. A gentle yet undeniable pull that makes people open up, soften, and unravel truths they have kept buried for years. Because something about the way you listen without judgment, without rushing, without needing to prove anything, creates an atmosphere where the soul finally exhales. Carl Jung called this the helper syndrome, a rare psychological pattern found in those whose empathy is so deep and whose spirituality is so instinctive that transformation happens around them almost effortlessly. You don't force change. You don't preach change. You simply embody a stillness that invites others to find themselves again, as if your energy quietly tells them, it's safe now. You can come home to yourself. And yet, this powerful gift often begins as a subtle pattern you don't even notice at first. Strangers confide in you within minutes. Friends tell you their darkest truths with trembling voices. And people who usually hide behind emotional armor suddenly break open in your presence. They might say, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And the truth is, they don't, but their subconscious does. Your presence feels like a sanctuary, a warm room in the middle of a storm, a soft ground where their defenses melt and their real selves step forward. This is the mark of someone deep in the process of spiritual awakening. Someone whose inner clarity and emotional intelligence naturally extend into the outer world. People feel lighter after talking to you, not because you solved their problems, but because your calmness reorganizes their chaos. Like two chemical substances meeting As Jung famously said, if there is any reaction, both are transformed. And with you, there is always a reaction gentle, healing, and often life-changing. But with this gift comes a quiet burden, one that grows heavier if you don't learn the spiritual wisdom hidden underneath. When you hold space so deeply for others, you risk becoming their emotional anchor, the person they lean on for stability, clarity, and meaning. And while your empathy is expansive, it is not infinite. Over time, you may notice your energy fading after long conversations, your thoughts sinking under the emotional weight you've absorbed, your spirit becoming quieter, not in peace, but in exhaustion. This is where discernment becomes essential. You are here to guide, not to carry, to reflect, not to absorb, to support, not to lose yourself inside someone else's inner storm. Without boundaries, the helper becomes the one who needs help, not because they are weak, but because they gave too much without realizing their own needs. As your spirituality deepens, you learn to distinguish between being present and being consumed. You begin to understand that true service does not wound the servant, and real compassion does not require self-sacrifice. You start recognizing the moments when someone seeks your presence not to heal, but to escape their own responsibility. The moments when silence is wiser than advice. The moments when walking away is more loving than staying. And with this awareness, your transformational presence evolves into something even stronger, an energy that heals without draining, that guides without rescuing, that empowers without absorbing the other person's shadows. Your role changes from emotional sponge to conscious mirror, from quiet caretaker to awakened soul who knows how to hold space without losing yourself inside it. And in that shift, you discover the rarest truth of all. Your presence transforms others most powerfully when you are also fully present for yourself. To honor your transformational presence, declare it with confidence. Comment below. I rise and transform, to affirm your growth and inspire others to awaken their power too. 8. Deep inner sense of purpose. Even if undefined, you feel a quiet but persistent pull towards something meaningful that you cannot yet fully explain. And this feeling is neither random nor driven by ego, but rises from a deeper place within you. Carl Jung described this mysterious force as potential-seeking expression, a truth that lives in your soul long before your mind can give it a name. When you ignore this inner calling, life may begin to feel strangely empty, heavy with anxiety, or lacking direction, even when everything on the surface appears successful. Yet when you begin to live in harmony with it, a subtle but powerful sense of peace and fulfillment starts to grow. Not because all your questions are answered, but because your inner and outer worlds begin moving in the same direction through spirituality and spiritual development. This inner purpose often reveals itself through restlessness, deep sensitivity to meaning, and an unshakable sense that you were meant for more than survival, routines, or shallow ambition. You may feel different from others, not because you are better, but because you are wired to search beneath the surface of life. The discomfort you experience when living out of alignment is not a weakness. It is a signal from your psyche that something essential is being ignored. Jung believed that when this inner voice is suppressed, the soul suffers, and that suffering often shows up as emotional fatigue, dissatisfaction without a clear cause, or the haunting feeling that your true life has not yet fully begun. As you begin to listen inwardly, even in small ways, you may notice gentle shifts unfolding. Your priorities start to change, your relationships transform, and your choices become guided more by inner truth than by external validation. What once felt like confusion begins to reveal itself as preparation. What once felt like weakness becomes a pathway to depth, and what once felt like loneliness becomes space for authenticity. You are no longer driven by the need to impress, but by the desire to become real. Peace does not come from certainty, but from sincerity. It does not come from control, but from trust. It does not come from perfection, but from honest participation in your own becoming. Your purpose does not arrive as a loud revelation or a single dramatic moment. More often, it appears as a direction rather than a destination, a way of being rather than a status or title. It guides you through intuition, moments of discomfort, unexpected synchronicities, and quiet inner resonance. As you follow these signals, your outer world slowly reshapes itself to mirror the truth you are discovering within. You may not immediately gain clarity about where the path will lead, but you gain something far more powerful: a sense of coherence, a feeling that your thoughts, values, and actions are finally aligned. The deeper message is clear. Your inner calling is real, even when it feels undefined. And ignoring it breeds anxiety, while honoring it cultivates peace. Discomfort often acts as a compass rather than a flaw, and true fulfillment grows from alignment rather than achievement. Your spiritual development unfolds not through force, pressure, or comparison, but through quiet awareness, courage, and steady attention to what your soul has been trying to express all along. In the end, discovering that you may carry one of the rarest psychological types on earth is not about feeling superior. It is about understanding your depth, your sensitivity, and your unique responsibility to the world. As Carl Jung so beautifully revealed through his wisdom, if these 8 signs resonate with your inner life, it may be a reminder that your way of seeing, feeling, and thinking is not meant to be hidden, but honored and refined through self-awareness and conscious growth. If you found value in this message, please like the video, share it with someone who needs this insight, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more deep psychological and spiritual teachings. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos on Carl Jung, self-discovery, and inner awakening.